Thank you so much for joining us for CBN NewsWatch. I'm Ephraim Graham. Ahead today, Iran's supreme leader reportedly ordering a direct strike on Israel after the death of a top Hamas leader in an attack in Tehran. But even as Israel prepares for retaliation for taking out terrorist leaders, Prime Minister Netanyahu has a warning for anyone who attacks the Jewish state. We're going to hear from a special envoy of the Israeli Foreign Ministry who explains why they're better prepared with better equipment to fight, if necessary, on multiple fronts. And while Israel is ready for war, the United States is not. An alarming assessment from defense experts. The U.S. is not prepared even as it faces the biggest security threats since the end of World War II. And a cyber war with Russia or China could even knock out our power and water in our own homes. All those stories and more are ahead today, right here on CBN NewsWatch.
This is CBN NewsWatch.
I want to begin this half hour in the Middle East, where the supreme leader of Iran has reportedly ordered a direct strike on Israel after the killing of Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh. Israel is bracing for that retaliation after the elimination of Haniyeh and a top commander of Hezbollah. But as CBN Middle East Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell reports from Jerusalem, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is warning those who attack Israel will pay a steep price.
On Wednesday, the funeral procession of Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh made its way through the streets of Tehran. While Israel has not claimed responsibility for his death, the New York Times reports Iran's Ayatollah Khamenei has ordered a direct strike on Israel in retaliation for the attack on Iranian soil. A senior Hamas leader said Haniyeh's death affects ongoing negotiations between the terror group and the Jewish state.
There is no point in talking about ceasefire negotiations amid bloodshed and assassinations.
The IDF also confirmed the death of Mohammed Deif, Hamas's #2 leader in Gaza, on July 13th. In an address to the nation Wednesday night, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said Israel is prepared for any retaliation.
There are challenging days ahead of us. Since the attack in Beirut, threats have been heard from all sides. We are prepared for any scenario and will stand united and determined against any threat. Israel will exact a heavy price from any aggression against us on any front.
He emphasized Iran is the power behind all the threats.
Since the beginning of the war, I have conveyed that we are in a struggle against Iran's axis of evil. This is a war of existence against a stranglehold of terrorist armies and missiles that Iran wants to tighten around our necks.
U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin said America will stand by Israel in the event of an attack.
If Israel is attacked, we certainly will help defend Israel. You saw us do that in April. You can expect to see us do that again.
Middle East expert Avi Melamed expects a calculated retaliation by Iran.
I don't think that the Iranians are going to retaliate in the same way they did in April, but they will definitely look for some sort of like shocking, sort of speaking, response that will be on the one hand powerful and send a message, but on the other hand will be very careful not to result in a dynamic that will actually result in an all-out war.
Melamed adds Israel is sending a message with these twin strikes.
You could read the Israeli message to Iran as one that says we are willing, able, and ready to be engaged in a whole-out war, which is not something that I think the Iranian regime actually is interested in at this conjunction, at this time.
These latest crises come as Israel marks the 300th day since the October 7th attack. On the front page of the Jerusalem Post, it reads in English and Hebrew, "Our hope is not yet lost."
Chris Mitchell joins us now to continue our coverage. Chris, Netanyahu says Israel is prepared for any retaliation by Iran. Does the Israeli government believe, as many analysts do, that Iran does not want an all-out war?
I think they suspect that Iran does not want a full-scale war, as well as Hezbollah, but they are prepared for any scenario. The analysts we talked to earlier said, believe Iran doesn't want that full-scale war for several reasons. They face a dilemma right now. First of all, how to respond to these strikes, both in Tehran and Beirut. First of all, they want to send us a message or retaliation that's strong enough to send at least a symbolic message. but also they don't want to send it too strong to go ahead and start a war. For example, one analyst told me that hitting Tel Aviv may be something that would start a war, but maybe they would hit an IDF base that would be less likely to escalate the situation. Ephraim, this is really not a science, but you know, here in the Middle East, some of these unwritten rules of the current conflict that both sides try to keep it from a low scale, from escalating into a regional war.
Chris, how dramatic are the two strikes by Israel against Hezbollah's #2 man and Hamas's #1, along with taking out an Hamas military commander?
Well, it's huge, Ephraim. According to the New York Times, Iranians are in a state of shock. They, first of all, have to be embarrassed, actually having, their guest be executed or assassinated, as some say, on their soil. Deeply concerned about how their security has been so compromised. It also sends a strong message to Iran, really that you're not safe. And also, Ephraim, it really sends a message to the rest of the Middle East. First of all, that Israel has capability, and secondly, that has willingness to use its power. Same thing in Beirut. Precise intelligence. And what they did within 48 hours since the rocket attack in Magdal Shams that killed those 12 Jewish children, they went ahead and eliminated the man responsible for that attack. To do that, you really have to have been tracking him for months. You have to have boots on the ground, and it really sends a message to Hezbollah as well. Like, we know who you are, we know where you are, and we know when you're there. Just incredible intelligence by Israel in both of these strikes.
Avi Melamed says Iran and Hezbollah face a dilemma. What does he mean by that?
Well, as we said, I talked about, what Iran and Hezbollah are doing. They face the dilemma how to respond to these strikes. They want to be strong enough to send a symbolic message at the very least, but they don't want to send, too strong a message or retaliation to go ahead and start a war. They really need to thread the needle on this. We'll see what happens. Here in Israel and here in Jerusalem, we're kind of expecting what that kind of response is going to be. Some are saying, and there's been some reports that maybe for the next 3 days, starting tonight, there's going to be attacks on Israel. So it could be something small and symbolic, could be something large like April 13th, but we'll see. A strong message by Lloyd Austin as well, that he said that the U.S. will help defend Israel, and that would be a caution to both Hezbollah and to Iran.
Netanyahu also talked about some accomplishments recently. What were the ones he mentioned?
Well, one we mentioned in our report, Mohammed Deif. He was Hamas's #2 in the Gaza Strip. Israel had been trying to assassinate him for years, and they did that on July 13th. Also, a major strike against the Houthis. The Houthis, as you know, about 2 weeks ago, they sent a drone into the heart of Tel Aviv. Israel struck back by eliminating a huge oil depot and a port that the Houthis in Iran had been using to supply the Houthis with weapons. They targeted Hezbollah's #2 there in Beirut just 2 days ago. And they've also eliminated thousands of Hamas terrorists in Gaza. They've destroyed Hamas's military infrastructure. They took over that key Philadelphia corridor along the Gaza-Egyptian border. They control the Rafah crossing, and all of these accomplishments were taken actually when most of the world was telling Israel not to do it.
Chris, Israel is a political issue for many here in the United States. How much does the American political scene influence the Middle East?
Well, we know we're all looking at what's going to happen in November, Ephraim, but here in the Middle East, it's of huge concern, and it's going to have a huge impact on which way the Middle East is going. One analyst said it changed dramatically after two recent events. The first was the attempted assassination on former President Trump. Some people interpret that Trump's increased his chances for election, to President Biden deciding not to run for re-election. So the analysis was after the assassination, attempt, Trump's chances went up. And when Biden stepped down, he became less of an influence and he was considered weaker. So everyone in the Middle East is calculating whether it's going to be a Trump victory or a Harris victory. Moderate Arab nations like Saudi Arabia are watching closely. So is Iran and its proxies. And many people believe the region here in the Middle East is going to change one way or another in less than 100 days. We'll see what happens. But everybody here in the Middle East is watching and waiting to see what's going to happen in November.
Indeed. Thank you so much. Chris Mitchell reporting for us from Jerusalem. We appreciate your insights. Stay safe and know that we back here are always praying for you and our team there on the ground in Israel. Coming up, so if a broader war does break out in the Middle East, how is Israel prepared to fight on multiple fronts? We're going to hear from an Israeli Foreign Ministry Special Envoy about its state of readiness when we come back. World leaders are concerned Iran could carry out a military response following the assassination of a Hamas leader, which may escalate into a broader conflict in the Middle East. On this week's edition of The Global Lane, Israeli Foreign Ministry Special Envoy Fleur Hassan Nahum says while Israel does not seek war, it is prepared for fighting on multiple fronts with better readiness and equipment than in the past.
Well, it's not ideal, as you can imagine. We didn't want any of this. On the 7th of October, we were brutally attacked from the south. And on the 8th of October, they started attacking us from the north, which is reminiscent of all the different wars that Israel has had to fight for its existence from 1948, when all the Arabs' armies around the region, all the neighboring Arab countries, attacked Israel in the hope of destroying Israel. But we have essentially Iranian proxies trying to destroy the state of Israel. And like in 48 and 67 and 73, when we were incredibly outnumbered, and in those days, we were also out firepowered. We didn't have the military that we have today, and we won those wars. And if we have to fight a multi-front war, we will fight a multi-front war. We don't want any war at all. But if Israel is capable, absolutely. When you're fighting for your life, you give it everything you've got, and that's always been our secret.
Well, what must be done then to prevent an escalation?
Well, the first thing that Hezbollah should do is actually go to the resolution 1701, which was the UN resolution that was signed at the end of the 2006 war. All they have to do is really comply with an agreement they signed, and that is to go and take their troops behind the Litani River, which means it gives Israel a buffer zone between Hezbollah and our border. What's been happening since October 8th, we have had to mass evacuate. At the beginning, 100,000 people. Now it stands at 60,000, 70,000 people from the north, 10 kilometers from the border. And we've done something that we've never had to do, and that is create a buffer zone within our country and not outside our country. We need to get back to the point that we return our displaced people back to their homes, and that we have enough of a buffer zone with Hezbollah to protect our communities in the north.
Well, we know that missile that killed those 12 children in Majd al-Shams was made in Iran, and Iran sent about 150 ballistic and cruise missiles directly from Iran against Israel back in April. We can't forget that. And now they're funding and have been continuing to fund and arm Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis against Israel and her allies, as you mentioned. So what needs to be done then to stop Iran from spreading this violence in the Middle East?
Well, first of all, the West has to accept that Iran is the problem. Remember, at the beginning of this administration, we had another attempt at cutting a deal with them. These people are genocidal jihadists. And so the last thing America has to do is try and get towards a deal with Iran. They should be isolated. We should have maximum pressure. And we should actually think about regime change in Iran, which is something that the Iranian people, 80% of the Iranian people, want regime change in Iran. And that's what we should be working towards. Because otherwise, everything else going on, whatever Israel's doing and whatever America helps us to do, is whack-a-mole. Because everything goes back to Iran.
Well, how might these two assassinations then affect Israel's effort to get American and Israeli hostages back? I guess ceasefire talks are unlikely to proceed now.
Well, that's a good point. I'm not sure what's going to happen now to the hostage negotiations, which is very sad for those families who have been relentlessly advocating for a deal to get their loved ones home. So I'm not sure what happens now in terms of the hostage negotiations. But I still think that the pressure on Hamas now, with the number 2 political person, the guy who brings them the money, the guy that brings them international allies, that guy is now gone. I'm hoping that Yahya Sinwar, who is the mastermind of all of this, will now feel the pressure, will now feel the isolation in order to perhaps want to save his own neck and make a deal with Israel.
Well, it sounds like he wants to be a martyr. To American politics, it looks like Kamala Harris is going to be the Democrats' presidential nominee. How concerned are you about her stance on Israel, and what difference would selecting Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro, a Jew, as her vice president make on her Israel policy?
Well, Josh Shapiro is a well-known Israel ally. He is somebody who is very happy to call himself a proud Zionist. And so I'm very happy that he's being considered. We need good people. We need people who understand who their real allies are. I believe that Vice President Kamala Harris made a mistake by not going to the speech of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. At that point, she's chose the fringe and not the center. And this is really, I think, ultimately not good for her electoral hopes. But I hope she understands that the real enemy here is Islamic fundamentalism. And it troubles me deeply when I saw a little clip of her 3 days ago speaking to a Muslim audience saying, I don't believe in Islamic fundamentalism. I don't believe in using that word. So I don't understand really what her stance is. I'm not sure anybody really understands what her stance is on foreign policy in the Middle East. But somebody like Josh Shapiro could really help her.
Okay, Fleur Hassan Nahum, Israel's Foreign Ministry Special Envoy, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Also on this week's episode of The Global Lane, a look at Nicolas Maduro's unlikely election victory in Venezuela and President Biden's changes to Title IX, allowing gender identity protection in U.S. schools to take effect today. We're going to bring you the latest on that. You can see it all on The Global Lane this evening on the CBN News channel. It begins at 8 Eastern. You can also see it on the CBN News app as well as YouTube. Still ahead, Israel may be ready for major warfare, but the United States is nowhere nearly as prepared, even as it's facing the biggest security threat since the end of World War II. We're going to bring you a look at this alarming story. It's coming up next. Consider this warning. The United States is not ready, even as it faces the most serious security threats since World War II. The somber warning came from defense experts to senators on Capitol Hill this week, and a major war could even affect Americans in their homes. CBN's Dale Hurt has the story.
The heads of the Commission on the National Defense Strategy told the Senate Armed Services Committee that the United States is nowhere near prepared for the dangerous multi-threat environment it's facing.
The public has no idea how great the threats are.
Commission Chairman Representative Jane Harman and Vice Chair Ambassador Eric Edelman issued a dire warning to the committee Tuesday.
The homeland, if there's a conflict, is not going to be a sanctuary anymore, and the first attacks will likely be in the cyber domain, and they will be incredibly disabling.
The public is essentially clueless about the massive cyber attacks that could be launched any day by our adversaries, not just nation states, but rogue actors as well.
The report warns a cyber war with China or Russia would be devastating. America's critical infrastructure would come under attack, possibly cutting off power, water, transportation, and financial systems, and shutting down the supply chain. The report states major war would affect the life of every American in ways we can only begin to imagine. The report echoes a warning FBI Director Christopher Wray gave Congress.
China's hackers are positioning on American infrastructure in preparation to wreak havoc and cause real-world harm to American citizens and communities if and when China decides the time has come to strike.
One of the things we might anticipate, for example, is if China decides to annex Taiwan or whatever euphemism they might use, they might engage in a major cyber attack here first, for which we are underprepared.
The Commission found the U.S. defense sector lacking in almost every area, including integrated weapons technology, platforms, and software. With recruitment levels for all branches lagging, America needs a larger fighting force, and the hearing discussed lowering physical standards for recruits and even instituting a draft.
We found that the joint force is at the breaking point of maintaining readiness today. Adding more burden without adding resources to rebuild readiness will cause it to break.
And with so many cyber threats, the Commission also said the Pentagon must find a way to somehow lure the best and brightest computer minds away from Silicon Valley and into national service. Dale Hurd, CBN News.
We're back with an encouraging word for your day ahead. Please stay with us. Time now for your Thursday Thankful. I pray you'll join me in this prayer of gratitude. Father, I thank you for not requiring that I understand it all. You simply require that I trust you in it all. I trust you, and I know if you are for me, who can be against me? You are indeed on my side. And to that prayer, may we all say amen and amen. That will do it for this edition of CBN NewsWatch. Remember, you can always find more of our news programs on the CBN News channel. You can find them there at any time. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you back here tomorrow.